Good afternoon, everybody, and I would like to welcome you to our fourth Development Management Forum. I am Vicky Glover-Ward, and I am the Executive Member for Planning and Growth. A couple of housekeeping notes. We're not expecting a fire alarm test, so if you hear one, we should all leg it out of the fire exits. There's one at the rear of the chamber and one at the front of the chamber. We are broadcasting the meeting, so can I ask that everybody remembers to use their microphones? This is not a hybrid meeting and questions will only be taken from those in the room. It's a really hot day. We have got water and glasses behind me. If anybody would like to avail themselves of a drink at any point during the meeting, please do, just so that we don't have anybody dying of thirst. Notes taken during the meeting by officers shall be available to view online via the Council's planning register using the application reference or address and shall be attached to the planning officer's reports. The terms for holding a development management forum means that if we are looking at this particular application strictly, then we would not be considering it because we can only normally consider a planning application at the early stages of the application. This site was given hybrid planning permission in October 2019. The application before us is around a reserves matters application, which does not qualify for a DMF using the strict interpretation of the policy. But there was such a strength of local feeling, I decided, in consultation with planning officers, that we would waive the strict interpretation of the rules and that we should hold a DMF on this matter for full transparency and to facilitate the primary purposes of the Development Management Forum. That purpose is to allow residents to have their say about a planning application. This also allows the opportunity for developers and planners to be able to take the views of residents into full consideration. The intention of this forum is that major issues may be discussed in a safe environment that allows all parties to have a constructive discussion of the planning issues raised by the petitioners and to try and build consensus to resolve concerns. There is longer to speak for the residents and applicants than at a Development Management Committee, which is also at the end of the planning process, whereas the DMF should give the opportunity to discuss the issues thoroughly. However, for this matter, planning permission has already been given for what used to be called A5 use under the pre-2020 planning system and which is now designated as sui generis, but it is a hot food takeaway. As such, discussion on whether or not there should be a takeaway is somewhat moot, as the permission cannot be rescinded, but we can discuss the details of the application for the reserved matters approval. We have received a late representation from our local MP, Josh Dean, who has sent in a letter to the Director of Place, Sarah Saunders, and the Associate CEO for the council, and he has expressed support for the position of the petitioners and has also mentioned that he does not support a drive-through for this site. The meeting will be relatively informal and timeframes are not going to be strictly enforced as they would be at a formal meeting, but I would ask everyone to try and stick to the point with the opportunity for questions later. If everyone can be polite and remember to be respectful, that would also be appreciated. The agenda for the meeting is obviously the introduction that I've already done, an introduction of the main parties, and then presentations from the applicants and then petitioners, questions to the applicants, a summing up by the petitioners, and then we will do something called building consensus, and then the meeting will come to a close. The subject for the DMF is the 324-1528 REM Reserved Matters application in respect of appearance, layout, landscaping and scale for the creation of a local centre comprising buildings in use classes EA, EB, ED, EF, F2 and sui generis for the restaurant hot food takeaway, with internal access roads and paths, car parking and cycle parking and associated landscaping relating to parcel E granted outline consent under reference 3211749 VAR at land at Bishop Stortford South, Bish 5, off Whittington Way, Bishop Stortford, Hertfordshire. The final decision on this reserved matters application will be determined in accordance with the Council's constitution and scheme of delegation, which could be either by the Council's Development Management Committee or through delegation to officers in the Development Management team. So I'm going to ask all the parties to introduce themselves, and I will start with the petitioner and their team, and then I will go around the councillors that are sat here. We are welcoming two Bishop Stortford Town councillors, and I will be minded to allow them to speak, even though strictly speaking, again, we would only normally allow district councillors to speak at a meeting and ask questions. So if I can start with the petitioners.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Diane Hollybon. I represent Bishop Stortford South.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dale Reeve. I'm the head teacher at the Bishop Stortford High School.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Colin Arnott of Thorley Parish Council.
And if I can ask officers to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Neil Button. I'm Strategic Sites Team Leader in Development Management at East Herts.
Afternoon all, I'm Martin Plummer. I'm Assistant Director for Place Delivery at East Herts.
Councillor McAndrews.
Councillor McAndrew, School Governor, Bishop Stortford High School.
Richard Bauer, Councillor for Bishop Stortford Town Council, representing All Saints Ward.
Councillor Marnie Goldsmith, District Councillor, representing Bishop Stortford North Ward.
Councillor Chris Wilson, representing Bishop Stortford All Saints.
John Dunlop, Councillor for representing Hunsdon. I'm also on the DMC and Chair of East Herts District Council.
Councillor Simon Marlow, Bishop Stortford South.
Yvonne Estott, Councillor for Bishop Stortford Central and a member of Development Management Committee.
Stephen Skinner, Bishop Stortford Town Councillor, representing Silver Lees Ward.
Scott.
Good afternoon. Scott Hackner, Principal Planner. I'm case lead for the application on behalf of East Herts.
Hi, Mike Hawes. I work for the corporate team at McDonald's. I head up the public affairs team. So, you know, my responsibility is essentially working with national and local governments.
I'm Jonathan Wallace from Litchfields, with the planning consultants and the agents for this application.
Catherine Chapman, Managing Director, ADL Traffic and Highways Engineering, and I'm the transport consultant for McDonald's.
Please may I ask the applicant to present the scheme for a maximum of 15 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the forum and councillors.
Hi, Jonathan. I'm just going to share the presentation. Just a little cue on some slide.
Okay. Okay, can you move to the first slide, please? Thank you. Good afternoon. I've got some introductory slides and then we'll move through those to answering the questions raised in the petition. The site forms part of a wider site known as Bishop Stortford South, which is allocated in the East Herts District Local Plan from 2018. A master plan was developed in association with the outline permission that was granted for the wider St James's Park development, and this has established both the mix of development and the land uses and also the location of the uses across the St James's Park site. Significant progress has already been made in relation to the delivery of the wider site, and now Vistry, the Co-op and McDonald's restaurants are working together in partnership with other operators in order to deliver the new local centre and an area of public open space. Next slide, please. This site illustrates the local centre site, and I've shown on there the description of development for the outline permission. As you can see, the uses granted allowed for 1,000 square metres of retail floor space and up to 2,200 of other uses, including the Class E uses and sui generis use that many people have raised issues about in relation to this scheme. Building heights within the local centre are defined within the outline permission as being no higher than 13 metres, and we've respected that in the scheme that's come forward. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the relationship between the local centre site and the area of open space adjacent to the site. We aren't here specifically in relation to the local centre open space today, but our drawings show the local centre open space because the two schemes have been developed jointly, working in partnership with Vistry, and actually we've used the same landscape architect who's here today in order to ensure the two schemes integrate together. These images illustrate the site in its current condition. They were taken in earlier this year. Okay. Basically, the local centre site lies at the southern end of the wider St James's development. Access to the site was approved at the outline stage, with access to be taken from Beaumont Avenue, the spine road which runs through the site. The site's not within a conservation area. There are no listed buildings within or adjacent to the site, and the site lies in flood zone 1 and is not in an area of flood risk. So while obviously an important site, it's not a site that is subject to any particular planning constraints. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the reserve matters description of development. Essentially, what this application relates to is the details of appearance, layout, landscaping and scale of the centre. Next slide, please. Moving on to consultation and engagement. We first engaged with the local community in 2024 and submitted a reserve matters application later that year. Since then, we've received feedback on the scheme, both from the community and from officers, and we've worked hard over the last year, 18 months, in order to develop the scheme further, in order to try and respond positively to that feedback. And we submitted a revised scheme in May 2026 after consultation in February. In terms of feedback on the scheme, there was clearly feedback in relation to the drive-through element and the traffic that would be created by the scheme. There was common views that the second vehicular access to the scheme wasn't necessary in general terms. A view that the pedestrian and cycle access to the site could be improved. A view that we should focus more on a sense of place and good public realm within the scheme. Comments on the elevations around the architectural rhythm to the scheme. And finally, generally a view that the local centre and the public open space should work better together and be more integrated. We took on board that feedback and our response is shown on the right-hand side. We've removed the drive-through element of the restaurant. We've now got a single point of vehicular access to the site. The existing access that's already there to the south will now only be used as a service access for the McDonald's use. Cyclist and pedestrian connections have been strengthened. The public realm has been completely redesigned to create a place where people want to visit and stay. The local centre buildings have all been redesigned with new, stronger elevational treatments, and I'll show those in a minute. And the scheme, the public open space scheme, has been redefined and better integrated. This is the layout, which has been submitted since May. Most people have probably seen this already. Just to comment upon it and highlight a few of the changes that we've made. Clearly, the drive-through lane's been removed. That's allowed us to move the restaurant building further to the east. This, in turn, has allowed greater space around the main buildings facing Beaumont Avenue. Southern access has been removed, other than retaining the access in a limited way for the service vehicle servicing McDonald's. The main parade has been pushed forward towards Beaumont Avenue as well, so we've created a bigger area of space between the two sides to the site. We've changed the layout within the car park to move to a one-way system within the car park. We have increased the level of secure cycle parking and put the cycle parking at the perimeters of the site in order to encourage people to just dismount and walk through the site rather than cycle through it. And I think the other key change is probably the introduction of the ramp and more development of the ramp, making sure it meets standards, and also the steps in order to create both a vista through the site from Beaumont Avenue, but also create safe pedestrian access. The next slides illustrate the next 4 slides, I think, illustrate the elevations to the scheme. This is the scheme as revised, which, I don't know whether, Scott, you can go backwards and forwards between the original. That was the original scheme that we submitted in 2024. There was a fair degree of criticism in relation to the design approach on that scheme, so we moved. You can go back to the scheme that we've got. We tried to create a greater architectural rhythm through the elevations. We've also increased the glazing generally to create more active frontage within the buildings. And if you can move on to the restaurant building, we've ensured that that was the original restaurant scheme, which was, although the materials were going to be defined as being common to the main parade, the scheme was very much a modern format McDonald's. The scheme that we've actually moved to now is very much in keeping with the architectural design of the wider scheme. You move on to the next slide. I've got these images later on. We can share them on screen as we're having the debate, but these are the CGIs we produced and are all featured in the design and access statement, which show how the scheme might look if it's developed in its currently proposed format. On the mix and scale of uses, there's not too much to say. The buildings are all two-storey. They're all under the 13-metre height set in the outline permission, and we've got the unit sizes there, but the total floor space falls within the parameters of the outline permission. And on access, it's worth just saying the access was approved at the outline stage and will be taken from Beaumont Avenue. It's a two-way priority junction access. Secondary access is now, as I've said, just to serve a service area. It won't be used for general public access. The food store, the nursery, the cafe, the community building, the gym delivery vehicles will all access the site via Beaumont Avenue, with delivery scheduled to take place out of operating hours. Pedestrian and cycle access will be provided from Beaumont Avenue and the Southern Access Road, with dropped curbs and tactile paving proposed. And I'll also mention the stepped-in ramp pedestrian access, which we just talked about and you've seen from the layout. So I'll hand over now to Catherine to talk about the first few issues raised on the petition.
So the traffic impact of the proposed local centre have been carefully considered. We've provided.
Sorry, could you put your mic on, please?
So the traffic impacts of the proposed local centre have been carefully considered. We've submitted a full detailed transport assessment, which includes traffic modelling of the local road network. We've taken into account the wider master plan, and we've allowed for growth up to 2032 future year assessments, so 5 years post proposed opening. The results have shown there's sufficient capacity at the Beaumont Avenue roundabout, Beaumont Avenue site access, the St James's Way roundabout, Oberry Way roundabout and Thorley Street roundabout to accommodate the proposed traffic. Next. So the parking provision has also been considered within the TA in detail. We're seeking to provide a balance, ensuring that the parking demand can be fully accommodated whilst avoiding an over-provision and generally encouraging visitors to access the site by sustainable modes. There's 103 parking spaces within the main car park, including 9 accessible, 4 parent and child and 6 EV. There's a further 4 car parking spaces and 5 motorcycle spaces within the McDonald's service area for staff and couriers, and there's 67 covered secure cycle parking spaces. We've assessed the cumulative parking demand generated by all the uses on an hourly basis, and that's all those calculations are within the transport assessment. Peak parking demand would be expected to be 75 vehicles on a weekday, 94 on a Saturday, and therefore can be accommodated within the site. Car park will be subject to on-site management and AMPR cameras to restrict long stay parking, and there are existing on-street parking restrictions in the vicinity of the site which control on-street parking. There's a mix of uses within the local centre that's approved through the outline permission. The proposal includes separate pedestrian and cycle access from Beaumont Avenue and the Southern Access Road. Dedicated pedestrian routes are proposed through the car park, east to west and north to south. Cyclists are encouraged to dismount by signage on entering the site and walk through the centre. And the car park is subject to a 10-mile-an-hour advisory speed limit. And the pedestrian routes through the site east to west have raised table crossings to ensure traffic speeds are low. The proposed layout has been subject to an independent road safety audit, and all matters raised have been addressed. So the traffic impact was addressed at the outline planning stage when the local centre was approved. We've undertaken a full further traffic impact assessment as part of our TA. The local road network has been assessed using industry standard modelling, and there's no capacity issues. And the site layout, as I said, has been assessed independently by a road safety auditing company.
Issue 5, the residential amenity in the local environment. Clearly, the location of the development was agreed through the original master plan and confirmed through the outline planning commission. As we understand it, careful consideration was given at that time to the different uses within the wider St James development. Various conditions were applied to the outline planning permission in order to protect residential amenity. Highlight condition 22, which sets the noise limits for plant equipment. 24, which requires the submission of details of extraction, odor control and discharge, and that will obviously apply to the restaurant use going forward. And condition 26, which relates to the submission of details of external lighting, each phase of development, including obviously the local centre phase. All of the conditions are understood and accepted by the applicants and proposed operators. And the final point to highlight on this slide is that the development will be highly energy efficient. We've undertaken a BREEAM pre-assessment, and we're targeting a very good score on that, so we're talking about a highly energy efficient scheme. On other matters relating to the environment, an air quality assessment has been undertaken and submitted with the Reserve Matters scheme. That concludes that impacts from vehicle emissions should be negligible, subject to mitigation, including EV charging provision, the secure cycle storage, travel plan and measures to support walking and cycling. A construction environmental management plan will be prepared to manage dust during the construction phase, and that will be subject to a planning condition. Noise was considered at the outline stage, and a planning condition was attached to the outline permission, which we need to meet. I highlighted that on the earlier slide. On litter, litter bins will be provided throughout the development, and anti-littering signage will be displayed within the restaurant and the car park. McDonald's staff will also conduct a minimum of 3 daily litter patrols throughout the centre, and will pick up all litter, not just McDonald's litter, any litter within the centre itself. That can be subject to a planning condition as well, should the council decide to impose that. On the next slide, this relates to impact upon community health and wellbeing. In our view, the local centre will have a positive impact upon community health and wellbeing. The centre will provide a range of facilities which meet day-to-day needs of local residents in a location which is highly accessible by all modes of transport, including by foot and by cycle, thereby encouraging active travel. The land use mix is exactly the same as it was originally proposed in the outline permission. Just one restaurant takeaway use is proposed and will complement the wider offer within the centre, providing an accessible and affordable place to eat and socialise. And in general terms, we don't think there's any basis or any sensitivity locally which should give rise to concern in relation to health and wellbeing.
So, in terms of site operations, the delivery management plan has been provided as part of the submission. Deliveries.
Sorry, again, can you put your mic on, please?
Sorry. Deliveries to the co-op are expected to occur early morning, and for the McDonald's, they will occur out of hours. There's expected to be one main delivery to the co-op most days by a 12-metre rigid, and deliveries to the McDonald's would be 3 to 5 days, 3 to 5 deliveries per week. The nursery will have expected typically 1 delivery a week. Community and the other users on the site will receive deliveries via box vans, and there's a dedicated loading bay within the car park. Refuse will be collected from the co-op by the delivery vehicle they backhaul, and McDonald's delivery partner Martin Brower, they also backhaul waste as well, to all recyclable waste. Refuse collection will be via a private contractor using a 9.6 metre vehicle, Couriers would have access to dedicated motorcycle parking and in the McDonald's service yard, so they won't be using the customer car park.
On antisocial behaviour, well, the local centre has not been developed yet. There's no evidence to suggest that antisocial behaviour is likely to be a particular issue here. The scheme seeks to design out opportunities for antisocial behaviour and talk in more detail about that, but in particular through, for example, establishing clear sight lines through the site and selection of street furniture which is robust and less likely to be vandalised or easy to vandalise. The applicants, as part of the commitment to that, the applicants are keen to secure secured by design accreditation, and this will be secured by a planning condition imposed by the planning authority. Both the Co-op and McDonald's were the two main operators involved in the scheme at this stage. Both adopt a zero tolerance approach to any antisocial behaviour, and should it be necessary, would work with local stakeholders, including the police, to address any issues which arise. CCTV would operate within the restaurant and food store to deter antisocial behaviour and assist with the identification of offenders once a committee once a crime has been committed. And the final point to note is that consultee comments have included those from Hertfordshire Constabulary, who have no concerns with the submission.
So the traffic generation has been calculated using an industry standard database called TRIX. And this is the same methodology that was used by Mayor Brown for the outline application. The traffic generation assessment is robust. It's been carried out for both a weekday and a Saturday for the hours of opening. The traffic generation relating to the restaurant has been sensitivity tested based on surveys of existing McDonald's restaurants and adjusted for the fact that there's now no drive-through lane. The centre will be accessible by walking, cycling and public transport. It provides a local facility for residents and employees at St James's Park. The scheme has been designed to encourage access by non-car modes. And I think we've taken an approach which seeks to strike the right balance between accommodating the traffic and the parking demand without having an excess of car parking that encourage car travel.
And just the final slide in summary, the proposed local centre forms part of a planned mixed-use development which was granted outline permission in 2019. The location of the local centre was also agreed at the outline stage. All of the land uses proposed conform with the outline permission. The access arrangements are in conformity with the outline permission and the reserve matters approval relating to the adjacent business park. The location and the land use mix has therefore already been approved, and reserve matters only is now being sought for details of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. We've undertaken extensive consultation in relation to the scheme and amended the scheme following feedback from the community and from officers. In our view, the scheme will be an attractive centre and a place where people wish to spend time. It'll offer a range of uses which meet the day-to-day or many of the day-to-day needs of the local community as envisaged in the original master plan for the site. And importantly, and we'll finish on this, it will deliver a community centre which will be a significant public benefit to the wider St James's Park community in a location highly accessible on foot and bicycle, which will encourage active travel. That's really the final slide, but we do have some CGIs on the next few pages, which I don't know whether Scott will just leave them there or can move through them as we're doing questions.
If you want to just move through them so people have had a chance to actually see what they're getting.
So 10-second each slide, shall I?
Okay. Oh, you just got them on a.
I'm just going through them, toggling
Right,
through them.
okay.
Do you want to describe actually, Jonathan, this view perhaps?
Yeah, I mean that shows the view of the car park effectively with the landscape scheme in the central area, the public pedestrian route through it, and also the pedestrian route going from an east-west direction, basically creating a safe route for people to cross. It'll be a raised table using the same materials to make it very legible. That's a view from the southern access road, looking back across the centre. You see the cycle access. To the right of there will be the secure cycle parking. You can see obviously the landscape scheme in the foreground. That's a view from effectively the entrance to McDonald's restaurant, as it would be, looking across towards Beaumont Avenue Those are the steps that take you up with the bus stops beyond. And you can obviously see the width of the pedestrian route that we're creating. That's just a view across the car park showing the cycle storage at the other part of the site. That's at the northern end of the site. That's a view down from Beaumont Avenue, looking through the site. Again, you can see the pedestrian route from the other side, and you can see the sort of central area between the nursery and the coffee shop. This is a view just highlighting how the steps and the ramp would work. The ramp has been designed to meet building regulation standards. We can talk in more detail about that if needed. This is the view looking at the back of the co-op. I didn't mention earlier, but there is a proposal now. We've incorporated in the latest scheme to create an area of open area at the back of the community centre, which means that community centre functions can open out into that space, and that will sort of look onto a sloped garden, which leads you up to the public open space scheme, which Vistry have developed. And that's a view looking back from the roundabout, looking back over the centre, and that scheme is showing the public open space. That's actually subject to some changes at the moment, which Vistry are introducing, which that slide hasn't caught up with that yet. So the scheme that will come forward through that application, it's not this scheme, will be slightly different to that, but it's a similar proposal. I think that's it, Scott. Those were just backup slides in case we need to go back.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll return to those while discussing things. So please may I ask the lead petitioners or their representatives to present their views for, I'd say 20 minutes, because I did allow a little bit of leeway.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. As before, I'm Councillor Diane Hollybon. I represent Bishop Stortford South Ward, which this current application sits in. During the consultation period, many residents have expressed concerns which have been forwarded to this authority. This is by far the largest planning application that I have dealt with in my 32 years as a member of this authority. Traffic implications are still relevant, despite the drive-through being stopped. Traffic in this area will escalate, not disappear. For example, drivers will visit from the nearby towns and villages, Sawbridgeworth, Spellbrook, Little Haddam, Much Haddam, Great Hallingbury, Little Hallingbury, all of which will compound the traffic issues who will be using either London Road, St James's Way, Beaumont Avenue, Whittington Way and Obery Way to access the proposed McDonald's. Eventually, Obery Way will become a rat run, leading on to Mountbatten Way from the St Michael's Mead and Bishop Park areas and including other areas of Bishop Stortford itself. During peak usage times of the centre, insufficient parking will occur as the 103 spaces will not cope. Also, the Renbrook site is full and their employees are already parking on edges of land as their car park is full. This only illustrates inadequate parking provision. I would add that Beaumont Avenue has no parking at all. Signs clearly say no parking allowed. Increased pollution, noise, antisocial behaviour will have a knock-on effect for all residents, both young and old alike. HCC Highways have objected previously, as has Public Health recently. Residents do want a local neighbourhood centre, but not a McDonald's for the many reasons, some of which I have alluded to. Remember, McDonald's vacated their business in town and relocated to Stansted. Their policy is to build off of roundabouts, for example, Stansted Airport, Freeport, Harlow. This latest application just doesn't fit in this area. During the master planning for this development, a takeaway was agreed, but no mention then of a McDonald's, as it was then envisaged that a small business would establish itself, not a multinational, international business. Also remember Rush Green, here in Hertford. We all know that the siting here of a McDonald's has caused no end of traffic issues and is also dangerous at times. Unfortunately, this authority allowed this to happen. Don't make the same mistake again in this area. You are a listening council, so we are told. So listen, please, to the objections and also to the residents. Vistry and the co-op and partners hopefully should revisit this. Put a business there that won't cause traffic nightmares for local people. This is a good public relations exercise for your reconsideration. I should add that I'm not against McDonald's, but I firmly believe that this is definitely not suitable as a development here. Finally, I would add that our MP has reiterated his concerns and support today in a letter to Sarah Saunders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Chair. Thank you also to the applicants for their presentation. As I said, my name is Dale Reeve, and I became head teacher at the secondary school in 2014. So I've been involved in discussions regarding the St James Park development from the very start, and have always supported the principle of creating a local centre to serve the new community. However, the application before us today is very different from the one that many of us originally envisaged, as Diane has explained, and therefore poses many risks to the welfare of the community, particularly the young people. I note from the presentation we've just received, no reference to schools was made at any point during the 20 minutes. This development will sit directly opposite an existing secondary school and a future primary school. We currently have 1,300 pupils at the secondary school, but at full capacity, those two schools will serve approximately 2,300 pupils alongside more than 200 staff, meaning over 2,500 people will be arriving and departing the area during peak periods every day. Beaumont Avenue already experiences major congestion during those peak periods. The proposed local centre introduces multiple uses that will each generate additional vehicle movements at precisely the same times that pedestrians, cyclists, bus passengers and drivers are travelling to and from school. The gym alone has a floor space of nearly 1,000 square metres and will require a membership of something like 1,500 people if it is to be commercially viable. 50 to 60 gym users would be expected to visit before work each morning, creating additional traffic during that peak period. Similarly, most drop-offs and collections for the nursery will be at the peak times of the day, while McDonald's will attract customers from far beyond the immediate neighbourhood, as you've just heard, again at peak times on their way to and from work. McDonald's is a global franchise. It advertises nationally. Its model relies on volumes of sales. It requires people to travel to it. The cumulative effect of all of these will create huge traffic congestion on Beaumont Avenue and every other road on the estate at exactly the times when hundreds of young people are moving around the area. I ask what account has been taken of the very large number of existing pedestrian, cycle and vehicle movements for the secondary school, let alone the future primary school, and how confident can we be that these movements can continue safely alongside the greatly increased traffic that will be generated. The parking assessment in May identified a standard parking requirement for the proposed development of 189 spaces. Even as a Zone 4 allocation, it should have had 142 spaces allocated. However, 103 have been proposed. The assumption, given that shortfall, is that many staff and customers will just choose to walk or cycle. Totally unrealistic, I'm sure you'd understand. While encouraging active travel is a commendable objective, critical planning decisions can't be based merely on hope or aspiration. Customers won't walk or cycle from Sawbridgeworth or across Bishop Stortford or those surrounding villages to get their McDonald's. They'll simply drive. When the undersized car park quickly fills, the overspill will encroach onto the surrounding roads, causing even more congestion. What does that mean for the safety of pupils walking and cycling to school, or maybe the parents with pushchairs heading to the nursery? Vehicles parked on verges, near crossings, around junctions, and in residential streets reduce visibility and greatly increase the risk of accidents involving children. On the matter of health, a report from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, released only this morning, makes clear that the national childhood obesity crisis we are facing places UK children among the unhealthiest in Europe. Schools promote healthy lifestyles, healthy eating, and positive choices. McDonald's menus may contain items such as carrot bags and cucumber sticks, but young people are attracted to the relatively low-cost, ultra-processed food high in salt, high in fat, and high in calories that is contributing to the worsening childhood obesity problem that we see. Locating McDonald's directly opposite two schools will significantly worsen this obesity issue for local children. The National Planning Policy Framework was revised in December 2024 to combat exactly this issue. So morally, how can this committee possibly consider it appropriate to fly in the face of such new legislation? Herts Public Health raised serious concerns and requested a health impact assessment be undertaken. Therefore, I ask, has a health impact assessment been completed? And if so, what were the findings? A venue such as McDonald's will become a natural gathering point for large numbers of unsupervised young people each evening. I know that from experience, posing serious antisocial challenges for local residents and the authorities. And the litter created will be spread far and wide, and collecting 3 times a day in the centre itself will not touch the surface of the amount of litter that will be created across the St James's Park area and beyond. Across the country, fast food premises have been identified as locations where vulnerable young people can be approached for criminal child exploitation, including county lines activity. I urge members to assess these risks very carefully when considering to locate McDonald's immediately opposite schools, serving thousands of East Herts children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I speak on behalf of Thorley Parish Council and many others who have worked for years to deliver the vision set out in the Development Plan Policy, BISH 5, for a mixed-use urban extension, including secondary schools, primary schools, and the provision of a neighbourhood centre, including local shops, to encourage self-containment and improve sustainability. That's a quote from the policy. The policy also required collaborative master planning. Since 2016, we have supported that through the local plan, the master plan, outline applications, neighbourhood planning, and more than 3 years' work considering this local centre. Yet what is now proposed bears little resemblance to that originally promised for St James's Park. But, as we've heard, the applicant continues to argue that the scheme complies with the original outline consent, and approval has effectively been established in principle. While changes have been made to this revised application, the proposal remains an edge-of-town, car-orientated development dominated by national operators, including McDonald's Takeaway, a Pure Gym, and a national nursery provider. You've also heard about the serious concerns about the impact of a fast food takeaway on pupils' health, well-being and safety, despite the revised NPPF, National Planning Framework, with which I'm sure you're familiar, requiring a refusal of hot food takeaways within walking distance of schools. This change isn't just a matter of community disappointment. It's also non-compliant with planning policy and within walking distance of schools. This change isn't just, but it's the transport and access issues which I want to focus on. The revised transport assessment, or the TA, which we've heard about, says it addresses only transportation matters related to the reserved matters. However, the proposals significantly alter how the local centre will access and affect the surrounding road network. Firstly, the Beaumont Avenue entrance, less than 100 metres from the high school, will become the main car park access. The southern access road for McDonald's deliveries also remains, despite not being approved in the outline or Area D consents. We believe these access matter changes could still be challenged. It also acknowledges that the original outline assessment wrongly assumed that the local centre would generate zero traffic. because all journeys will be linked to trips to other destinations. This is from the original transport assessment. That assumption is clearly no longer credible given the current mix of uses, but the TA relies on comparisons with theoretical permitted use scenarios, an approach for which there is no planning precedent. Now, the 2024 baseline survey, which is used as the baseline for the traffic forecasting, is also questionable, being undertaken when only 56% of the dwellings were occupied. The secondary school, as we've already heard, was below planned capacity, and the primary school was not even yet being built. Despite these low levels of assumptions, the local centre will still generate 345 vehicle trips during the PM peak hour, in that hour, including 218 McDonald's trips. 332 of those movements will be through the Beaumont Avenue junction opposite the high school. And nearly 500 vehicles will using Beaumont Avenue in the AM peak hour. The wider impacts are equally concerning. Only 36% of McDonald's traffic will use, according to the TA, will use the strategic St James's Way and A1184 routes southbound. 64% will use the already congested roads Thorley Street and Obery Way through to Whittington Way. By 2027 forecast, even before the growth which has been accounted in the forecast in 2032, AM peak flows will exceed 1,520 vehicles on Thorley Street, 2,000 on the A1184 corridor south to Sawbridgeworth, and 800 on Obery Way and Whittington Way. I'm just quoting Appendix 11 of the TA. Yet the TA assesses only the 3 roundabouts on St James's Way, completely ignoring the wider network where the outline TA identified the most severe congestion, delays and capacity problems. It also excludes the cumulative effects of 2 major permitted developments along that corridor, Kex's Farm and of course the former High Street, former high school site, which has just opened. Can this be mitigated? Well, I have to say the mitigation can't be considered under an application which is a reserve matters application excluding access, as was rejected by the inspector on Rembridge's appeal, which many of the members of the committee here will recall. What was it, about 2 or 3 years ago? Taken together, these shortcomings show the assessment significantly understates the likely consequences for traffic congestion and road safety across Thorley and the wider area, while raising serious questions about whether this application exceeds what can properly be considered under a reserve matters application submission, which excludes access. But the good news is there is a clear way forward. The council should require the applicant to test the proposal properly against the master plan, current policy and the transport and health impacts identified here. That can't be achieved by stretching a reserved matters application beyond its proper limits. The reserved matters application should be withdrawn and resubmitted as a new full application for a centre that complies with the NPPF and the development plan, improves sustainability by showing how transport and health impacts will be avoided, minimised or mitigated, and improves sustainability. Sorry, I said that. So we say to East Herts planners, to McDonald's and to their development team, let's work together to ensure we deliver a local centre that policy requires, the local community needs and deserves, and for which the developer can get a planning consent without further challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to invite any comments from the applicant on the issues identified so far.
Where shall I start? Okay, so the traffic implications. So we have reviewed the traffic distribution. I mean, I would say from the beginning, the reserve matters relates to layout, scale, appearance, and landscaping, not traffic. So the principle of use on this site of up to 2,200 square meters of various uses, including could be 2,200 square meters of takeaway, has been permitted. There is an access of Bowman Avenue. There was no stipulation that the local centre was going to be car free. There was no stipulation that there would be a specific occupier or any specific occupier. So in that case, that development, the original assumption there was that there would be no external trip generation from the local centre, and that was the assumption by Mayor Brown in that TA. Because of the level of concern that has been raised, we have done a full traffic impact assessment of the local centre traffic. But then if you're going to accept that the proposed local centre would generate traffic, then by default, the permitted local centre must generate traffic. And we've also made those calculations. And there is an industry standard database that has a range of different uses in it: nurseries, gyms, cafes, and McDonald's restaurants, and also takeaways like Domino's and Pizza Express. There is this database there, and it gives you survey data, trip rates by hour for the different uses. And then you apply that trip rate to the growth of the floor area of the unit, and that enables you to calculate the level of traffic. So when you were talking about the gym, and forgive me, you said 1,500 members? Right, okay. But I've calculated not all of those gym members are going to go to the gym every single day. So they're going to be split across 6 days a week. So I've expected that I've calculated that there would be 200 to 250 gym members a day visiting the gym, spread between 6 and 11. So when you make those calculations spread across the hour, and I take the data that has been collected independently on these operators and apply it to the floor area of the gym, you know, the numbers are not what you are suggesting. So, you know, and this is where I've calculated this full tricks assessment. If you bear with me, because I just have to get my PDF to work. So the gym on a weekday, bear with me, gym. Yeah, so the proposed vehicles to the gym during the morning peak, 13 in, 10 out, and during the evening peak would be 11 in and 15 out, which is quite different to the numbers you were suggesting. And I don't know what technical basis your numbers were calculated on. So, you know, we are making those calculations. Sorry, those were the nursery numbers. The gym numbers: 4 in, 4 out during the morning peak, 13 in, 7 out during the evening peak. So, you know, there's quite a difference in the numbers. But that's spread across, you know, we're talking about being spread across between 6 and 10 o'clock at night, potentially. Yes. So you I've taken the tricks database, I've selected gym sites, I've applied the floor area to the trip rates that the database gives me, and that calculates the level of traffic that the gym would generate. So the permitted 2,200 square meter gym would be 228 vehicles a day, and the proposal would be 96.
Is it worth adding that you're talking about the peak hour between 8 and 9?
Yeah, the peak hour is 8 till 9.
A
So
lot of
during,
people using the gym
yeah.
arriving earlier than that, leaving earlier than that because they're using the gym before they go to work.
And the same with the nursery. You know, the nursery peak is going to be earlier than the typical network peak because people are going to be dropping their kids off before they go to work. And the evening peak for the nursery is also going to be spread out because people will be collecting their children typically between 4 and 7 or 4 and 6:30 whenever the nursery closes. So there is this spread of traffic. It's not just all concentrated at the same time. With the McDonald's, the peaks are the breakfast trade, lunchtime, and in the evening. Between 3 and 4, we're expecting the McDonald's traffic to be 46 and 48 vehicles. During the evening peak, 70 to 71. So, the peaks, the network peaks and the school peak are not the same. So we have made the assessment on the network peaks, which is consistent with the Mayor Brown TA. We have assessed the pedestrian movements that would be generated by the development. The proposed traffic in my TA for the total development in the morning peak, 135 inbound, 130 out, PM peak 175 in, 169 out, and Saturday peak 194 and 197 in and 194 in and 197 out. So all of that traffic has been assessed, and the level of pedestrians, we're expecting that 30–40% of trips would be non-car modes, and we have assessed the level of parking demand cumulatively. The planning authority, the parking standards, we are below the parking standard of 142 spaces. The council, the national planning policy presents that developers should take a vision-led approach to traffic and avoid proliferation of car parking to encourage sustainable travel. The planning authority have reviewed the car parking and are satisfied with the level, and they don't want to see an excess of car parking on this site. We had a meeting with the planning highway authority last month, which was generally very positive. We discussed the traffic effects were not really the issue. There was some minor design features and clarification, but the overall traffic effect and the transport assessment they were satisfied with it. The modelling approach uses industry standard modelling. It's the same approach as Mayor Brown have taken. The traffic levels include growth, and which would account for committed developments that have come forward. It also includes the full master plan traffic generation, and it includes the full traffic generation by the local centre. Now, the traffic...
Can I just jump in? The Highways Authority will obviously assess all of this and will look at it, and they are the experts.
Yeah.
I think if we acknowledge that concerns have been raised,
yeah,
and that your report has been prepared by a professional, and that Highways from county will be assessing it, I think if we leave it there, because we are under a time constraint,
okay.
And you may have other comments about the points that have been made before we go on to the questions.
Okay.
I'm not going to say a great deal in response to the comments made, other than to reiterate the fact that the scheme is in line with the Outline Planning Permission. We've discussed this at length with planning officers from East Herts, and I think there is agreement that the scheme is in line with the Outline Planning Permission. So with the greatest respects, I disagree on that. I also strongly disagree that the scheme is an out-centre retail park. It hasn't been designed like an out-centre retail park. I think the images that have been shown to you today demonstrate that it's been planned in a very different way. It's been planned to support and encourage active travel, both from the residential area it sits as part of, but also from the adjacent business park. It's been planned in a very different way, but fundamentally it's in conformity with the Outline Planning Permission. And what we should be talking about today is about whether we've got the design approach right, and the layout and the appearance of the developments. Those are the matters that are before us today. Thank you. Do you want to add anything, Mike?
Yeah, there were a couple of comments I thought it would help to clarify just on the operating model. There was some reference to franchising and sort of what that means. So nationally, we operate 1,500 stores across the UK and Ireland. 90% of those are franchised. If this store does open, this store would also be franchised. It's certainly within the franchisee's interest and within the business's interest to work collaboratively and in support of the local community. And obviously, Dale, when we met previously, that was the point we made, and I think that still stands. Some of the issues that we touched upon, certainly litter and ASB, the teams are from the centre and at a local level, teams invest heavily to address those types of issues. You talked about litter and the litter picks, but there's a lot more that goes in behind it around investing in sort of strategic location of bins, advertising campaigns. We work very closely with all the Keep Britain Tidy groups. We know it's a real issue of concern locally, both where we operate currently and certainly where we are proposing new stores, and that's certainly an issue. We do lots of work in all of our packaging, or 90% of our packaging is recyclable. So a constant ongoing thing that we are always working on. ASB was covered, but we have very close working relationships with the Home Office, and again invest heavily in our teams. We've got a whole range of tools that we can deploy in certain locations to address those types of issues, and certainly the Home Office and the police teams that we do work with are always very supportive and see us as kind of leading in that respect, and that would certainly be no different here. So as I say, I think there's lots of things we could come back on, but I appreciate that a lot of those will depend on the operation of the store if it is successful and if it opens.
So I'm going to do something I probably shouldn't do. As a councillor that has Rush Green McDonald's in her ward, what I would say is I know with Rush Green that the litter does come outside the site. I know it's a smaller site. And I also know that the Rush Green McDonald's teams do go out and litter pick on a regular basis, the wider area as well as the immediate area. And I would suggest that you might want to look at whether, if there is constant complaints, because there's a lane that people like to sit at the end of and eat McDonald's and then leave lots of bags of litter, that you might want to add that into one of your statements. But as I say, I'm making it as a suggestion. I'm not telling you to do it. Thank you. Right. We are going to move on to questions to the applicants. I'm going to go through the lead petitions and representatives first, then the local ward councillors, and then any from the DM committee members, but please try to not predispose or predetermine your position while asking questions. The rest of the councillors, and then we will move on to the next bit. Thank you. So, petitioners, if you've got any further questions.
Yes, a couple from me. Just if I ask Catherine, just for clarification, you mentioned that the National Planning Policy recommends sustainable travel. Could I ask if that was the National Planning Policy Framework from December 2024 that you're referring to? So you are referring to
microphone, please.
So the December 2024 framework recommends a vision-led approach to development.
Right.
So promoting walking, cycling and public transport, which is why I was explaining that in context of the fact that the parking provision has been reduced on this site. The other key test is that development should only be prevented or refused if there is a severe residual cumulative impact or an unacceptable impact on highway safety.
Okay, so if I could follow that with a question then regarding that policy framework, what paragraph 97 of that framework refers to?
So paragraph 97 relates to hot food takeaway within walking distance of schools. However, as I'm sure Jonathan will tell you, in this situation, the principle of the hot food takeaway has already been allowed for.
Yeah, the application, the planning application was determined in 2019 in the light of national planning policy.
Mike, please.
At that time. So the application doesn't. The application is in relation to the reserve matters details that we've highlighted today, not the actual principle of the land use, which has already been established.
Yeah, you'll appreciate my confusion given that we're quoting the National Planning Policy Framework from December 2024 in our presentation, and then referring to one that was live in October
I understand.
2019.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What
I have
I would just add, sorry, if I could
oh,
just finish off as a supplement to what Catherine said on sustainable travel. Sustainable travel and sustainable transport wasn't something that was invented by the NPPF in 2024. It's been a hallmark of planning policy for many years, as I think Councillor Arnott will appreciate. Sustainable travel has been around for a long time. In fact, we used to have a thing called national maximum car parking standards, but the hallmark of policy has been not to provide more car parking spaces than the operators actually feel that they need, so as not to encourage more car travel. And that's the principle that we've tried to uphold, and we've been in discussion with the planning officers about to try and strike the right balance.
I think that's a crucial point, isn't it? The right balance, and I fear that that's not been reached at this stage. I just had another question regarding the trip rates for McDonald's that was mentioned earlier. Was that for McDonald's in a town centre, a local centre, or one on the edge of town? Because those would surely be different for trip rates. And this McDonald's would obviously be on the edge of the town in a local centre.
Yeah, well, it's a suburban area and a neighbourhood centre, isn't it? So just bear with me.
Can I tell you, you use them from Totton in Hampshire and Ripley in Derbyshire?
Yeah, well, we've reviewed a number of McDonald's. Well, we've reviewed the TRICS database for McDonald's that are in suburban or neighbourhood centre locations, and I've also looked at surveys of McDonald's that were located in Totton and Ripley. And we've also done a comparison on TRICS for the with drive to takeaways as well. So as I said, you know, like Domino's, you know, the Domino's trip rate is very low. We've acknowledged that the McDonald's as a market leader would generate more traffic than potentially a Domino's would, even though there's no planning restriction on operator. So, you know, we've assessed the traffic for the McDonald's robustly, and we've adjusted it for the fact that it's now no longer has a drive-through lane, and as such, it will generate less traffic.
So I can move my next question then. Can you tell me whether a health impact assessment has been carried out as requested by Public Health Hertfordshire? And if so, what were the findings?
We haven't undertaken a health impact assessment in relation to this. It's a reserve matters scheme, and you wouldn't normally undertake a health impact assessment in relation to a reserve matters scheme. I'm not sure what value it would have in the context that the use has already been established, and that the principal issues here relate to the layout, appearance, and scale of the development.
But it was recommended by Public Health.
With great respect, we get lots of requests for lots of things from all sorts of objectors, but they're not all necessarily raising relevant issues that are relevant in planning terms. We haven't been asked to prepare health impact assessment by officers. Officers may want to comment on it, but we don't see it as relevant to consideration of the matters before the council at the moment.
I'd just like to allow our principal planning officer to make a comment.
Yeah, I'll start. So thank you. I mean, I think firstly we have to acknowledge the speaker's comments and the concerns that have been raised. You know, particularly this question about the impact on health, the impact on safety, impact on people who are going to be using the centre. These are all legitimate planning concerns. However, it is also the case that this is a reserve matter submission, and were we to determine this application along the basis of some of the questions that have been asked, we would be acting ultra vires, which is outside of our ability to determine the application. So we could not refuse this application for an absence of a health impact assessment. That's not to say that it isn't a concern, because it is a clear and obvious concern to a lot of residents and parents of children going to the school. And so, you know, whilst we share those concerns, it isn't within the scope of this approval of detailed submission to be able to address that particular concern. And likewise with the the provision of land uses, they are matters that have been given planning permission in terms of their broad use. And so it isn't within this reserve matters to be able to reject a use because of the traffic impact. What I would also say is that I think we appreciate the amount of time that the speakers have gone into putting very well to put together representations and spending time over and above what we would normally be seeing. But I think we have to be led by the technical experts, and the applicants' consultants have gone over and above what would be normally required and expected with the reserve matters submission. So all of the transport information that's been submitted is certainly well in excess of a lot of the reserve matter submissions that I've dealt with in my time as a planning officer. And so we will be led by the advice from the County Council, highways engineers, in terms of their input in terms of traffic impact. Again, those concerns are legitimate concerns. It's right to raise them, and I think it's also right for the applicant to try and address them as best they can through the technical information. And so whilst the application can't necessarily be refused on those grounds, it's right to try and address them through the planning process, and that's what I think has been done in this instance. But to go back to the original question about health impact assessment, it's certainly not something that we could insist that is required as part of a reserve matters process. Thank you.
Can I take up that point directly? Is it therefore ultra vires to accept an impact assessment, a traffic impact, a transport impact assessment, which isn't a reserved, dealing with access, which isn't a reserved matter?
So I can ask the question again, please.
Well, you know where I'm going. You said that it would be ultra vires even if you thought it was relevant in this case. Consent has already been given, and this is a reserve matters application, and this is a consideration which was taken on board in the original application, and is and is therefore can't be considered at this stage. What I'm saying is, however, you've been presented with two very extensive transport assessments, which set out the case for the access and accessibility of this, despite the fact that access is not a reserved matter. You have to accept entirely what was presented to the original and the hybrid application, and the variations, and I've been tracking it all the way through, which of course did not consider that access was a reserved matter for further consideration, and yet we're being asked to consider. We've heard an awful lot about it, a lot of additional access. Can I ask I don't necessarily expect, but maybe the applicant can help us, because of course, can I ask what the motives were for changes to access as a reserved matter? By adding access as a reserved matter in the original 2024 reserved matters application, the applicant appeared to accept that they couldn't rely on the approved outline scheme for the type of access and level of accessibility to the local network it required. Was that the case? Because when you first presented this application,
Can we go to, rather than making speeches, you've asked a question,
Yeah,
so I'd like to go to Neil first, and
Thank
then.
you. Yeah, I'll answer. I mean, I know we've had quite a few conversations about this issue along with the case officer, and as you know, Colin, the access is as approved as part of the original application, which provides an access to the local centre from Beaumont Avenue. That access is in the same position, and there is a planning condition on the original application that requires the detailed design of all all accesses, and so the applicant intends to stick to that location of the access. The actual geometry of the access, may be adjusted to make it safe, for instance, and so that could result in some minor tweaks, and there is a process that can be dealt with to do that. But essentially, access is consistent with what has got planning permission, and so that should be the end of the conversation on that point. In terms of the southern access, that's obviously been implemented in accordance with the Wrenbridge application, and again, there are no changes to that as part of this application.
And so, but the definition of access as a reserved matter, the guidance to applicants says that access matters include all routes to and within the site and their links to external roads and paths, which is why transport assessments carry out impact assessments across the network to see what the impact is of additional. Now, so I go back to my question. When the applicant first submitted this reserved matters application, they actually included access, despite the fact that it wasn't a reserved matter in the outline application, actually included access as a reserved matter. I assume because they wanted to change things. So what?
Well, I mean, the application has changed since then, though, as you appreciate. The application has changed because that had a drive-through going in at the time, and therefore there was a change to the access as part of that application, something that we picked up, and we had the conversation over, and the team the applicants are well aware of that, and so that has been omitted from the scheme. And so I think it's sort of we're not asking the right question.
Sorry, it's a very simple question. And actually, it said the applicant. What was the applicant trying to do in reintroducing access as a reserved matter when you first submitted this application? And what are you trying to do now you've taken it back out again?
I think that this is possibly going down a well that we don't want to go down. What I would say is, my understanding is that the access is not a reserved matter, and it is not included in the reserved matter in the original planning permission. Am I correct, please, officers? In which case,
they don't be reintroduced.
Yes, and they've withdrawn it. So therefore, it is not, and it isn't.
So why are we considering any accessibility to the rest of the network issue?
Because obviously it was a concern. I will go to you, but if we can make it quick, because I would like to get to some questions from others.
I'd like to try and help Councillor understand the point. The mic's on. The position was complicated in relation to access by the fact that Wrenbridge obtained a second vehicular access into the local centre site through their application for the Parcel D development, which is the Wrenbridge Business Park. You can shake your head, but the facts are that was granted on appeal. A second access was approved and was provided. That wasn't part of the original outline planning permission. And therefore, we had this slight anomaly where a second access had been approved through a reserve matter scheme for a different parcel of land, even though it provided the access into the local centre parcel. There was some confusion over that. I mean, we originally included access in the description of development. Following discussions with the council officers, we agreed as part of the amendment to the scheme that we would remove access because we were going to remove the use of that. Although it was developed and implemented as a main access into the site, we've taken the decision not to use it as a main access because we're going to have a service area that uses that access, and we'll have a main vehicular access from Beaumont Avenue, which was part of the original master plan approach. We're not making any changes other than to the detailed geometry of the access, and those details will come through discharge of condition 42 on the outline permission. And one of my colleagues talked you through this in February this year when we talked about the consultation and explained very clearly that we were going to use condition 42 and the discharge of that condition to supply the details of the detailed geometry of the access, but the access remains as approved in the outline permission. I'm sorry if that was a long-winded approach, but I just wanted to explain why there is some complexity to it.
Thank you. So if I can just reiterate that back to you. The access will be applied for as a discharge of condition and is nothing to do with the RMA.
Access has already been approved. The detailed geometry of the access will be applied for through the discharge of condition. It will be a technical matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
But that's not the point I'm making. There is a possible challenge to the second access, but I'm talking about accessibility to the rest of the network. What was approved, in effect, was the TA carried out by Mayor Brown in the outline application, which had zero traffic generation from the local centre. Now, clearly, you can't live with that. You can't live with the implications of that. That's why I think you tried to change access to make it a
Colin,
reserved matter.
This is about asking questions and getting more information. It's not about
I just want to know
continuing an
why the
argument
effects-
that it appears you've already had several times.
No, I haven't. This is the first time I've had the chance to actually discuss. I don't know who you think I was talking to about.
You talked to my colleague Alexandra Gavin in February. I was at the same event as you in February.
I am going to move us on from this. Are there any other
Not to the
questions?
transport consultant.
Sorry?
Okay, let's.
Could I just ask a little clarification regarding the gym numbers that were mentioned earlier? Sorry, just a question about the gym numbers. The suggestion that you would expect 4 in and 4 out in the morning.
During the 8 till 9 period, yeah.
What was that based on?
That's based on TRICS data.
For a gym of the same size as the one that's proposed?
I don't choose the sites which are within the TRICS database. They are completely independent.
Microphone again, please.
They are completely independent of me. They are the same approach that any other consultant will take when they access the database. Let me just.
Is it worth highlighting, Catherine, the data from 6 onwards? Because I think what we're confusing is the peak hour.
Yeah.
In general traffic terms, with the peak hour for the gym, which are 2 different things.
But I think the whole point is that, you know, we're fixating on the gym traffic, but we have looked at the whole of the development traffic, including the restaurant and the nursery, and we've looked at that holistically. And then I've assessed the traffic effects of the whole development. So, you know, as I said, you know, I've looked at the effects of the 175 vehicles inbound and 169 vehicles outbound and 135 inbound in the morning peak and 130 out, and I've distributed onto the network, and then undertaken the industry standard modelling effect of the roundabouts. And the site access is going to operate at 38% capacity. The St James's Way roundabout operates at 60% capacity. Thorley Street at 77 and Obery Way at 59. Now, the standard for a new roundabout would be 85. So when Mayor Brown designed the network and the St James's Way roundabout, they built in this future proofing as part of the design. So this scheme is not just about the local centre. This has been about a master plan, and the traffic effects have built in growth allowance. And so, you know, and probably because of COVID, that growth hasn't actually been realised onto the road network compared to how it was when the assessments were made.
So I'm going to go back to the fundamental item for the DMF, which is around making changes to what is being proposed and proposing alterations. It's not about delving down into data that's been provided by an expert and querying it. So I am not allowing any further questions on TRICS data, the report or anything else, because that is not the purpose of a DMF. Now, if there are any questions about or suggestions for alterations, then I'm willing to hear those. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to councillors and ask them for questions.
Happily move on to councillors.
Okay, great. Councillor McAndrews.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got a few general knowledge questions and observations, if you don't mind. Scott, could you pull up the master plan slide? Sorry. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Now, at the bottom right-hand side, members here will see the service area and where the McDonald's is actually going to go. Now, McDonald's is so popular that currently there's an overspill unofficial car park there, and on any day you will have 13, 16 vehicles parked there. And not only that, from the roundabout coming off the bypass, there's vehicles parked on double yellow lines and going all the way down. And there's heavy goods vehicles parked coming out of the where they load and offload. So my sort of question is, on the design of the car park, where are these vehicles going to go? Sorry?
Microphone, please.
Well, there are parking controls on the Parcel Southern Access Road. Those were implemented end of last year. So there is now sort of parking enforcement signage. There are double yellow lines on both sides of the road, and the Parcel D application is subject to a condition where they have to implement a parking management and control plan. Obviously McDonald's staff will be managing the service yard. So the service yard is for couriers and staff, and would not be members of the public will not be allowed to park their vehicles there.
No, my point is that once McDonald's built and the service areas in place, these vehicles will be displaced, and the only place that they will have access to is the actual car park, your 103 spaces. So what I'm saying is that out of that 103 spaces, there's probably 15 to 20 taken up before.
The car park will be subject to AMPR restrictions, which we will agree with the planning authority. So there won't be an allowance for long stay parking from visitors or employees of Parcel D.
Yeah. Okay. I think I've got my point across, and I'm not going to dwell on it.
Okay.
I've got to commend you on, unusual coming from me,
Okay.
the design of the development. Now, what we've actually got is that the gym has got allocated X amount of parking spaces, which is
There's no allocated parking. It's all going to be shared use.
right. Yeah, there's 22 set aside for the community within the development. Yeah, it's in your transport assessment. Right. You'll have to explain that.
So there's parking standards that apply to different use classes,
standards, yeah.
but those are recommended standards. There isn't a local centre parking standard. So what I have to do is take each individual use and work out the parking standards for that use and then combine them all together. So that isn't necessary that what it doesn't account for is any link trips, or any it doesn't assume that all of these would be together, these uses would be together in one place when they through the parking standards. Whereas in my assessments, you know, we're looking at everything cumulatively.
Yeah. Okay, moving on from there, what you've done really well is you've said that there's an area suitable to accommodate activities, including a marquee. A multi-purpose community centre event space of 200 metres squared, doubling the building's capacity and large enough for a marquee 6 metres by 12 metres for approximately, and it's good, 80 seated and 140 standing. Now, if that was utilised, would there be a parking standard for that?
No.
Now, over and above that, you've also set aside spaces 3 metres by 3 metres for 10 pop-up stands within the car park or the pedestrian area. Now, you've promoted it as a market. It could be a market, it could be various other things, but coming with each marquee would be 2 cars, I imagine, something like that. And that hasn't been, from what I can see in your parking standards, been accounted for.
Briefly, the trick's in the name. It's a community centre, so it's intended to serve the local community, and the expectation is that most people using the community centre for an occasion like that, where you would have a marquee, whether it be a christening or something of that nature, will be walking to the facility from the local community. It's meant to serve St James's Village, So we wouldn't anticipate high volumes of cars using that, and that's why there hasn't been a specific assumption made in relation to that. There is an assumption for the community centre there will be local groups that meet on a regular basis, local history society or something of that nature. Some of those people will drive, and that's the 22 spaces that you've referred us to, and that's the assumption that's gone into the overall total for the standards. But for the community centre and the outside spaces, we wouldn't expect to see a doubling or a trebling of the amount of parking, because people will be walking to the centre.
On that point, I've been chairman of numerous community centres within Bishop Stortford. They're all busy, full to the limit, and we get people from all over Bishop Stortford, and it's not local groups that actually go there, and they have classes, etc., and people drive to these classes from rural areas, etc. But I'll leave that one for the moment. Now, on the nursery, you initially put down for 40 children in the nursery. You've now increased that to 90, 96. I believe the business model for that is 90 to 130, depending on the type of children that actually go there. Now, you're actually saying that they're going to walk there or encourage walking and cycling. Now, how have you come to the figure you have?
Councillor McAndrew,
Yeah.
we're going down the tricks data
Right,
route
okay.
again. If
Okay.
you've got anything that isn't related to parking and number of trips, then I'll let you have another question. But we've only got 20 minutes left or so, and I know that there are other councillors that want to ask questions.
I will very quickly say that the nursery trip generation is based on tricks, and the average floor area for the tricks nursery sites was 508, and our proposal is 518, and the average kids at the nurseries that were surveyed was 94, and our proposal is 96. So the basis of the tricks is very, very close in terms of the scale of operation to the proposal.
Just 3-4 words and I'm finished. Since you put this proposal in, and nursery is actually open 200 metres away, catering for 69 to 79 children. I'm wondering what the impact on the nursery will be.
I can't say what. Well, if there's another local nursery, then parents are going to have more choice, aren't they? So, you know, they may not choose to use this one. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. That's not really related to this transport assessment, is it, or this development?
No, I'd agree. Other councillors, any questions? Councillor Estop, I think you had something.
The first two questions are really for committee, I think. One is in the outline permission, was there a parameter plan for the local centre? And the second one is how much housing is dependent on the local centre being completed? So in other words, what triggers were there in the outline application permission that depend upon this? Then so direct questions are, first of all, why is the hot food, why is the McDonald's separate?
Why is it over to the right, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It's really why is it's separate and it's not integrated with the local centre concept? I can see a concept with the parade, but I can't see a concept for having the separate.
Neil and Scott are aware we did look at various options that did include the restaurant on the other side, but we felt that looking at the various options in play, particularly in terms of all of the factors, including the need to make sure the servicing works successfully, and the design factors, that the option that showed the restaurant in that position worked best. That was the general conclusion. But what we decided to do, following the feedback that we'd received, was to basically bring the design of the building into the wider centre by basically following the same architectural style. So it's not a McDonald's standard format building, it's a Bishop Stortford St James's Park building that will house a McDonald's. And it also, it's not the plan of McDonald's to leave this building in 20 years' time, but if in 20 years' time McDonald's no longer wants to trade from it, this is a building that can be reused for other purposes. It's a standalone building that could be used for other purposes in the future, so it's future-proof in that sense.
Do you have a plan of the ground floor of a floor plan of the McDonald's? And really, we know that there's already a permission for the hot food use, but I wondered if we could see how much space there is for the socializing part of sitting down, meeting friends.
I don't have a plan, and it's not technically relevant to the Reserve Max scheme, but just to explain how the building works, the upper floor will be exclusively for kitchen and back of house areas. So although it's a two-storey building to match the rest of the design, basically the kitchen and staff areas will be on the first floor, and the ground floor will be public toilets, counter and seating. And there's around 90 seats proposed in the area. The number of seats has been increased because it's no longer going to be a drive-through, and therefore we're making sure there's enough seating so people can sit in and eat their food, which is obviously better on every level because there's less prospect for litter, etc. when people sit in.
And do you know what the opening hours will be?
I believe it's 6 a.m. till 11 p.m.
Thank you.
It will. That will be subject to planning conditions.
Okay.
And that is something that can be imposed at the Reserve Matters stage.
Okay. On this plan here, could you show how workers that work in the business area, how would they walk to the centre?
There's a dedicated pedestrian access, well, Scotch cursor in front of it, but and again, there we go. So can you see where the blue sign is with the bicycle and the little man?
Could you put
Oh,
your
yes,
mic on, please?
Yes.
Cycle access that goes from the footway cycleway on the southern access road directly into the McDonald's patio area.
If you can go through the CGIs, Scott, one of the CGIs shows that right at the very end, towards the end. Yeah. Right, that's it.
Okay.
That's the pedestrian cycle route there from the side.
So that goes to McDonald's, and then you keep going along that path until you get to the parade. Can you get into the front of the parade?
Yes, there's a dedicated east-west pedestrian link that again is 4 meters wide, and it has raised tables, so it'll be a level pedestrian access.
Okay.
Sorry, Scott, you had it there. That's it.
Okay.
So once you come into the patio area, the McDonald's, you can turn left and then go straight across the car park.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, on the last question, at the main elevation side, I was a bit alarmed at the images of the steep steps and the sort of the hairpin bend ramp, which seems kind of in a way, it seems a bit of a barrier. And I wonder why you've not been able to make use of the green open space beyond to get a ramp that just feels like it's naturally going down to the level of the shops. Because there's so much fencing, the steps are steep, it seems quite a sort of a deterrent rather than a welcome.
The ramp will be 2.25 by 3 meters wide, and there will be platforms, so there will be it will be graduated. The hairpin turn, I think there is 2.6.
Sorry to interrupt, but yes, I can see that you've designed that, it meets standards, you've got platforms and so on. It's just very, very severe, and because you got the spare space, you got that landscape space, which is vestries. I'm not quite sure how that's going to be used, but there's space to sort of get a more gentle route down to the shops.
The issue is that we have to maintain the position of the building was fixed, and we have to maintain that access into the rear sort of courtyard area at the back of the building. So, and also if you push the ramp further back, then the access is then behind the building, and then it wouldn't be as legible. the ramp design has been explored in great detail, but to keep the landscape area that's on the corner of the roundabout and the position of the front, the parade of the buildings, and to ensure that the ramp is legible and accords with the building reg standards, that there had to be some compromise. But there is an existing the main access into the there is a second access that's step free into the development from Bowman Avenue. I don't know whether we've got a view of that. So
we're just getting very short time.
Yeah.
So if there is one or two more questions, I will take them, but otherwise we do need to move on. Sorry, Stephen, district come first. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, this is really a point of clarity. Mention's been made of the NPPF stating there should not be a hot food takeaway within walking distance of a school. But my question, I think, I have the answer to this: can NPPF changes made since the outline permission was given be retrospectively applied? In other words, can the council refuse to allow hot food takeaway on this site and this location? And also, can we choose which hot food takeaway company? I think obviously we can't take possession of the site.
I'm going to move to the team leader.
In a word, no, we couldn't refuse an application against the NPPF, nor can we impose controls about the particular operator. And so that would be outside of the planning powers to be able to dictate terms. We have a range of other controls that are at our disposal to manage the use and the operator, such as hours of operation, servicing hours, details of waste management, noise controls, all those sorts of things. And also licensing is a way of controlling the use. But we, as a planning authority, cannot control or dictate end user.
Councillor Marlowe, and it will be the last one. I'm sorry, Councillor Skinner.
I'll put two in. The steps and the ramp, coming back to that, and that wide open space looked like a skateboard paradise to me. Have you got any thoughts about how you might control that? And secondly, with regards to the area at the back where delivery drivers come in and out, we have seen a huge rise in the number of electric bikes delivering around Stortford. I can only see that getting more, and I'm very anxious about the possibilities of collisions and over enthusiastic riders having to fulfill their function on time. What kind of policing of that are you looking at?
So there is the couriers. So the couriers will collect the orders from the service yard. So the McDonald's HGV.
Can you put your mic on, please?
Sorry. So the couriers will collect the orders from the service yard. The HGV deliveries will be out of hours, so there'll be no clash between delivery riders and HGVs. There is a dedicated courier access at the southern end of the restaurant building. So, and they have their own internal counter where they collect the orders from. So there is no reason for them to enter the public car park. And if they do come in through the main entrance, they're just going to be told you can't collect your order here. You have to go round to the appropriate counter. So that would be managed by the store.
Thank you.
In all the restaurants where that dedicated courier access can be provided, obviously couriers have to be the main entrance. Some restaurants. That's why we're introducing this design here. Make sure the courier access is separated out, so it's separated out in terms of movement, it's separated out in terms of activity.
And parking.
Thank you. Right, so I'm going to move to the summing up. As we have got very short amounts of time, I'm going to allow each side 4 minutes, not 5. So the petitioners against the application, if you could sum up your position in 4 minutes, that would be rather marvellous.
Members, thank you for your time and for your careful consideration of this, obviously the application and our petition today. Throughout this process, one thing has become abundantly clear: nobody's objecting to the principle of a local centre. We're here in support of that. St James's Park is a growing community that requires local services, facilities and amenities that can be accessed conveniently and responsibly. A well-designed neighbourhood centre has always formed part of the vision for St James's Park and should be welcomed as an important part of creating a sustainable community. The original aspirations for this site centred on providing facilities that would serve the day-to-day needs of local residents. What is now proposed, though, is something very different. The combination of a large pure gym, an expanded nursery and a substantial McDonald's restaurant introduces a level of intensity that goes well beyond what was reasonably expected when the outline plans were first discussed. We know because we were there at the time. No mention today of any of the bus stops, not even shown on the plan, and they obviously cause a great impact on the traffic congestion in the morning. The quoted figure of 75 cars on weekdays seems unrealistic, but I hear the points that have been made. But the peak times for a nursery, a McDonald's and a gym all appear very similar to me. Our concerns relate directly to the practical realities that residents already experience every day. Increased traffic, parking overspill, pedestrian safety and pressure on local infrastructure are all matters that deserve serious consideration. The consultation generated 1,252 objections compared with just 79 expressions of support. 94% of respondents objected. The petition calling for greater scrutiny through this forum attracted 10 times the number of signatures required to bring the matter to committee. This level of engagement is exceptional and demonstrates that concerns are both widespread and deeply felt. The strength of feeling cannot simply be dismissed as opposition to development. It reflects genuine concerns about the nature, scale and suitability of what is now proposed, as reinforced by the letter that's been received today from Josh Dean, our local MP. At the heart of these concerns is the McDonald's restaurant. Most of the feedback from those objectors very much wanted that removed. I asked the committee, when the original vision for this local centre was conceived, was it ever anticipated that a major fast food chain would be situated immediately adjacent to a primary school and a secondary school? A restaurant described by the applicants today as selling accessible and affordable takeaway food. For most local people, the answer is clearly no. That's why this element of the scheme has become the focal point of public concern. If the answer is yes, what impression of East Herts will that give when this becomes national news? The National Planning Policy Framework that has been quoted by the applicant earlier has evolved to recognise the relationship between hot food takeaways and the health and well-being of young people. The underlying principle is unmistakable. National policy is moving towards greater protection for children from the impacts associated with fast food outlets located close to schools. Members are entitled to consider whether approving a restaurant of this nature in this location aligns with the broad objectives of promoting healthy, sustainable communities. Are we willing to support a scheme that would worsen the obesity crisis among our young people? 4 times the obesity rate of Norway and Japan, we heard this morning. Type 2 diabetes, now a disease for teenagers, not just the elderly. Planning decisions are, of course, about policy, but they are also about placemaking. This is about the community we are creating for future generations and whether developments genuinely serve the long-term interests of residents. This committee has an opportunity to consider not only whether the proposal can be made to fit within a planning framework, but whether it represents the best outcomes for St James's Park. We ask members of this listening council to listen to the full weight of concern raised, consider the scale of local opposition, the unresolved questions surrounding transport impacts and safety, and to the particular health concerns associated with the proposed McDonald's restaurant. We urge you to be brave and do not approve the application in its current form, but request a sustainable neighbourhood centre appropriate for our community. We're told by the applicant that there will be no suggestion of antisocial behaviour, but I know from experience hundreds of young people
That's
pass
in
at
5
the end of the
minutes.
day. We're not asking for no development, we're asking for the right development of a sustainable local centre to serve the local people, which means withdrawing the application and submitting a new full application. We hope that in reaching the decision, The local authority,
I'm sorry, but that's been nearly 6 minutes. If you would like to speak in support of your application.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. The first thing I would say is that we believe that we've designed a very good scheme. We've worked closely with the council. Officers have challenged us constructively, and we've tried to respond positively to the questions that have been asked of us. The second thing I'd say is that the scheme is all within the parameters set by the outline permission, and I know there's been views set out to the opposite of that, but you'll be guided by your officers when it comes to committee on that. But we believe it's consistent in terms of location, because the location was set by the master plan. It's consistent in terms of the access, because the access is in the same place. It's consistent in terms of scale, because we fall within both the height parameters and the floor space parameters set by the permission. And the most important point is consistent in terms of land use mix. The land uses have already been approved. The third thing I would say just on the highways issues is we've tried to strike the right balance on parking. We want to meet the needs of the development. We don't want overspill parking problems, but equally it's important that we don't generate more traffic than we need, and we need to encourage cycling and walking. And we've tried to strike the right balance on that, and balance is the key word. We're going to use the ANPR, the automatic number plate recognition system, to try and manage the car park so that we don't need to provide more spaces. We've also, on the TA, we've also tried to assist by providing a TA. We provided it voluntarily. The point Councillor Arnott was making earlier is a good one in a way, in that the TA did not need to be provided. It was requested by the Highway Authority. In fact, the Highway Authority refused to comment on the application originally without an updated TA. So we felt duty bound to provide the information. What the information has done is assisted everybody in understanding what the traffic effects will be, and we believe they're well within the parameters set by the outline permission. And then the final point is we're happy to work constructively with officers as we move towards determination of the application. There'll be matters to discuss around planning conditions to make sure that the development is suitably controlled, and we look forward to those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So in summing up on the conversations held today, the following issues have been identified. I don't think we've actually come to any solutions. The drive-through is no longer on the table, and that is one of the items that has caused an awful lot of local angst. The second access is therefore no longer necessary, and that is being replaced with the service access as an alternative. Concerns were mentioned about the second delivery access regarding e-bike deliveries, cargo bike deliveries, and that was resolved by the comment that the courier deliveries would be separate, and also there was some other comments which I'll get onto in a moment. In terms of public realm, that there has been some redesign of the public realm, although that's still under consideration by Vistry. I believe, sorry, the open space is under consideration by Vistry. The public realm has been completely redesigned. In terms of architecture and the elevations, and planning officers can tell me off later, the somewhat boxy design for the McDonald's has been replaced with something that fits in better with the rest of the local centre and has more architectural interest from what I could see, although that's obviously a personal opinion. In terms of the main frustration seems to be about the fact that there is a McDonald's being placed on St James's Park. I did say right at the beginning of this, we have to act in a legal manner. We have to act within a legal framework. The planning permission was given over 7 years ago. And unfortunately, it is not something that we can rescind, and was pointed out by Councillor Wilson's question about whether it would be legal to then refuse an RMA based on the revised NPPF for 2024, of which it isn't. What we have spent an awful lot of time going through the traffic assessment. Thank you for clarifying that HCC Highways has requested. the assessment. I'm sure HCC will go through it with their experts. If the numbers within there are wrong in accordance with how HCC Highways assess it, I am sure that they will come back to you. But without our own expert in the room, I don't think that we could go through that in too much detail. The other thing that was mentioned was the construction environmental management plan around the control of dust and pollution during the works, and that is, I believe, to be assessed. There was an awful lot of discussion about litter bins and litter patrols, and I did make my own personal comment, but as I say, you can take that on board or not. There was a specific request around the Community Health and Wellbeing has requested that there be a health impact assessment of a McDonald's. A fast food takeaway is a fast food takeaway, whether it's a fish and chip shop, a Chinese takeaway, or whatever else. It is not going to be a salad bar, unfortunately. And that has already been consented, and we cannot really move from that. There was quite a lot of discussion about ASB, and I noted that you said that it would be aiming for secured by design. Also that that you are trying to design out ASB. Councillor Marlowe brought up the, and I must admit I did think it myself, the skateboarders paradise on your ramp, and that might be something that you would like to take into consideration when you are looking at designing out and securing by design, or providing them with a skate park on the open space, whichever is preferable. There's CCTV within the restaurant. I didn't hear anything about CCTV for the rest of the development. And maybe, again, that is something that you would like to consider, but you did note that Herts Constabulary have expressed no concerns with your design. The scheme may or may not be amended as a result of the comments here. I think the key that was being, as well as the healthy food, was around the parking assessment, around the travel, and around the active travel routes. Active travel is something that was in our district plan in 2018, which this planning commission came afterwards. So although it is in the most recent NPPF and probably ones before that, it was in the district plan at the time, and active travel is and sustainable travel is considered to be in conjunction with that. I note what you say about the obesity crisis. If there was a way of transporting either the McDonald's or the school, we would take it. But legally, there is not a lot we can do about it. You mentioned fast food premises attracting people who want to groom children for criminal activities, whether that be county lines or other activities. And that is maybe something that you could also take into account when you are looking at your internal designs rather than the planning permission designs. The wider impact of traffic, again, I would be minded to be driven by Hertfordshire Highways. We will give them the notes from this meeting and say that it came up as to whether that would be something that they would want to consider, as well as the more local impact assessment that has been put through. I made lots of notes about numbers and usage and how many people would be driving in and out. Again, I think that that is all down to Herts Highways. In terms of the way that you were addressing this, this is not a committee, this is a forum. The Development Management Committee may or may not be hearing this RMA. I don't know whether it's been called in, whether anybody's called it in. That would be a decision for the chair of DMC, not me. And he will make that decision accordingly, in which case you will get a second bite of the cherry at DMC to speak. And I think that was most of what was discussed. In terms of the 200 square metre marquee, which was raised by Councillor McAndrew, and associated parking for that. It may be we could look at either conditioning that or some other restrictions on the use, so that, for example, because I know, as I say, from the having Rush Green McDonald's, that between about 4 o'clock and about 7:30 on a Friday night, McDonald's runs hot in terms of how much it is serving. Ditto on Saturday lunchtimes, and it may be that use of something like the marquee may be discouraged at the same times as there's going to be high usage of McDonald's. But you would know better than me when you're likely to have your main peaks of people requiring a beef burger and chips or similar. I think that is around all that I have captured. On my own part, I find it very equally frustrating that we are hampered by government. What I would say, and it is no consolation whatsoever, but under the Planning and Infrastructure Act, we will not have the ability to set our own requirements for DMC, and this RMA would probably not qualify to be called in to DMC, and that will take effect from the 31st of October. So I know that Josh Dean sent us a letter. What I would say to Josh is that if there is anything he can do about the fact that local transparency and democracy and planning is being taken away from us from the 31st of October this year, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for their time and input today. Our planning officers will take the issues and solutions raised and discussed at this forum into consideration in the assessment of this application, and that brings this forum to a close. Thank you, everybody.